Hello, fellow kin. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to this week's or this season's final competitive event list review until we get our data slate at the end of the month. I promised I'd do one last video with the current points and rules, so I figured I would show you one of my favorite lists I came across so far in this data slate iteration. So without further ado, let's jump on in. In today's video, we will be covering the Toys of Mass Destruction Hertfordshire Winter GT held on the weekend of November 25th and 26th, 2023. As always, we'll be looking at the Votann matchups and placings, analyze the list, examine some strengths and weaknesses, and contextualize the results of the matchups. The list was piloted by Tom Lohman, who some of you might know and recognize from over at Goonhammer and 6++. Tom was able to take the list second place out of 25 players, ending the event with 4 wins and 1 loss. For matchups, Game 1 was a 53-83 loss against Eldari, a stunningly close game of 100-93 against Blood Angels, a Game 3 victory of 95-61 against Drukhari, a 73-39 victory against Necrons, and a final game of 100-71 against the Brave Astra Militarum. Let's take a look at the list and contextualize some of those matchups. Kicking things off, we have 2 Einir champions, each equipped with mass hammers attached to both a 10-man and 5-man Hearthguard squad. Both of these champs are taking the Weave Field Crest for a 4+ invulnerable save, naturally. Additionally, both are taking their own respective enhancements, being a Long List and Grim Demeanor. Grim Demeanor is a little iffy in my opinion because of its potentially limiting use, with most rulings not having the rule affect weapon stats, which rules as written, it's true, but it's also kind of really lame in my opinion because, yeah, it's separate from the unit, but the weapon is still part of the datasheet. So I don't know. I think it's a little weird, and I'm waiting for Games Workshop to FAQ that. They should have done that ages ago, but we're still waiting. So because of that, I think it's a little bit iffy to take, but I do still see the value in having this, which is most likely going to be attached to a 10-man brick, just in case there's something in your opponent's list that does qualify as negatively impacting your unit's stats, sort of building this in order to ensure you get the most value out of your 300-point investment. And of course, by that I mean at 300 points, you really want to make sure that this thing is going to be able to do everything it's designed to do. And so for 20 extra points, you basically guarantee that nothing will negatively affect its stat line. Now, the second champ is bringing a Long List as his enhancement. It's not entirely obvious to me at first which leader was attached to which Hearthguard unit size, but I'm assuming Grim Demeanor is being used to optimize the expensive unit, and so we can assume for this discussion that a Long List therefore goes with the 5-man unit. I don't typically ever build a list around any of these enhancements, and I don't think this one was built around it either, to be fair. More than likely, this was taken as an afterthought to fill in the remaining points. There's nothing wrong with this enhancement at all. In fact, I actually think it's quite okay. I just don't really think it will make or break games, and it's definitely not an auto-include by any means. But for 15 points left over, why not help your Wrecking Ball unit provide a little extra value? I also think if you were to take this, it does kind of work pretty well on this 5-man unit coming out of the land for it, which we'll talk about in a moment, because at the very least, it allows you to kill something which you're shooting, and then transfer the token to a nearby unit, which you then are charging, and you make immediate use out of using that token. Good tempo, honestly, thinking about this out loud. And I think the idea is quite fun. So both of these champs are taking mass hammers. I understand why, as the mass hammers tend to spike in damage, but I'm sort of becoming a fan of taking 1 Darkstar Axe if I'm running 2 champs. I feel like having some reliability and extra attacks, even at the cost of the potential for higher damage, it's always a nice option. There's also one more character here, being the Grimnir, and he's equipped with Wayfarer's Grace. It's a little bit of a costly unit, clocking in at 90 points with the enhancement, but I mentioned this is one of my favorite lists, and one of the reasons why is because in a podcast, Tom mentions how he took the Grimnir, honestly mostly for fun, as he had leftover points and he wanted to try it out. He mentioned being pretty surprised and having a really good laugh at the unit being able to simply pop out behind cover and do some surprisingly good damage to an enemy unit, then dying, and suddenly propping himself back up to continue zapping them again. More competitively though, the reason you would take this guy if you wanted to is because you're looking for an alternative backfield objective holder to your troops. And why? Because it frees up 20 points. You can think about it like this. All right, 90 points, you get 3 models consisting of 6 wounds with a 4-up save and 4-up invuln. This is the Grimnir and his core of units. Now, with that stat line, he essentially resurrects on a 2+ when you take this enhancement, which means you're really getting 10 wounds out of this unit. So you're more durable than a 10-man Hearthkin squad because of that 4-up invulnerable save, especially the 5-man alternative that you would leave behind since you'd be splitting it up with a Sagittar, and you have better damage into elite infantry. So really, it's a super solid and very valid choice if you want to do something like this. I still think I personally prefer the 5-man simply because of the ability to sticky an objective, but this is a legitimate use of the Grimnir if you wanted to include one in the list. Just being able to hold a backfield objective, substitute in for a Hearthkin squad, I think there is valid use there. For infantry, we're running 10 Hearthkin warriors with the high last cannon and magma rail. It's not super important what you equip these guys with, as they're really not here for damage, right? Just secondary and objective holding play. We also have 3 5-man berserk units, each equipped with concussion mauls and mole grenades. I'll mention these now because the list is only running 4 Sagittars, so this is important to contextualize the rest of the list. This is another really fun and interesting design choice, as it means every game you essentially need to decide who's going in your Sagittars and who's going to stay behind near your home objective. What I mean by that is that, look at this example, all right? For instance, do you send 4 Sagittars holding 3 Berserks and 1 5-man warrior squad, or do you reverse that and send out your 2 5-man infantry squads and keep 1 of the Berserk squads back? This really depends on the matchup you're in. If you're facing a threatening enemy who is really fast and aggressive and has means to get to your backfield, maybe you're going to decide to keep one of your Berserk squads behind and instead send out both of your troops inside of the Sagittars so you're able to get on objectives and sticky them forward screen, and you get some backfield protection as a deterrence with that 5-man trading piece being the Berserks. Because honestly, they're really effective at trading. Conversely, let's say you're against someone who's a little bit more of a slow army. There's no real threat to your backline. Maybe you're going to keep the 5-man unit of your Hearthkin warriors behind, and instead you're going to load up your Sagittars with 3 squads of Berserks and send those out to forward deploy and set them up the stage for mid-game. I really like this flexibility, making for some really interesting decisions as a player. For the Berserks, I mentioned in my previous video that the mauls are generally better, but I do like having 1 flex piece taking the axes. I think if I'm going to be running 3, I definitely would want 1 to have the flexibility of going into the axes, because 36 attacks are no joke, even at strength 4, because when you consider tokens, you can pretty reliably kill anything that's trying to bog your vehicles down. For elites, we have the 10-man Hearthguard unit with concussion gauntlets and vulcanite disintegrators. I do think this is the best loadout without a cal, and it gives you the most flexibility. Popping sustained hits 2 strat on these guys is brutal when you consider the number of devastating wounds you can pull, and the gauntlets themselves have better play into high toughness targets, meaning they're a little more versatile. I will say that I'm not sure if this is a typo in the list submission, but it looks like neither the champs or the Hearthguard are equipped with Teleport Crest. Instead, they're all taking the 4-up invuln on the Hesir. Again, I'd imagine this is a typo, as there's really no reason not to take the Teleport Crest in the squad for rapid ingress plays. Additionally, the Hesir is also equipped with gauntlets instead of the hammer. I personally prefer the hammer, as I do find it edges out against most targets for additional damage, but there's nothing wrong in keeping it consistent and just going all gauntlets. We're going to take a look at this in a lot more detail once I start doing the unit analysis videos after the data slate comes out. The other elite mentioned earlier is a 5-man Hearthguard squad, all with the same loadout. This time they're accompanied by the champion in a Hecaton land fortress. I'm a huge fan of this combination. I absolutely love it. I love the playstyle, I love the aesthetic, and I just love the archetype around this. You get really good movement and safety out of the land fort, which allows you to set up a really nice 8-inch move for your Hearthguard due to the disembarkation 3 inches. So essentially, it allows you to gain good threat range at 8 inches instead of 5. You also have the ability to reroll wounds if the land fort shot, meaning you get to fish for more devs off of your Hearthguard. I'm excited to cover these in more detail, like I said before, when I start the unit analysis videos post data slate, but there's some quick references in one of my prior videos, which I'll link down in the description below if you want to see the math. The land fort itself is running conversion beamer, which is my preferred option, and a panspectral scanner to ignore cover. This is essential in my opinion, as with such low quantity, high value shots, you really want to make the most of them and ensure to get through at all costs. So being able to negate the cover is absolutely pivotal to this unit having any efficiency on the table. Plus, the trade-off is a once-a-game missile, which is really underwhelming. The 4 Sagittars in this list are all running Hylas, fulfilling the necessary damage gambling requirement in a Votann list. I greatly prefer having them on the Sagittars versus taking the Magma Rail Cannon on the Landfort, as it's just way too unreliable. At least with 4 Sagittars you can expect some stability with the damage rolls over the course of the game, and the variance does average out here. Last but not least, we have 2 squads of Pioneers, 1 6-man and 1 3-man. I mentioned in another video how dangerous a 6-man Pioneer squad can be if it's left unchecked, at the cost of losing secondary play. With this list, we have both. 1 smaller squad to zip around, score, pressure, and 1 big unit to be aggressive and punish your opponent for getting too close. As always, all the eligible bikes are taking a high-las cannon with the scanners and the searchlights to ignore cover for the squad. This is one of my favorite lists this season, and for good reason. I think it's really fun, it's really fast, and it plays into some super strong archetypes that fit my playstyle in the list that I'm going for myself, which I'll be likely covering in next week's video. I'm happy that Berserks are getting the recognition they deserve. These guys are absolute machines, and if they're used correctly, they basically always trade up. With 3 mole launchers, you can also help ensure the slow ability goes off, which has been super clutch for me in my games. So there are some very clear strengths with a list like this. For starters, it has excellent mid-board presence. Once the Landfort gets to the center and your Sagittars carrying Berserks are properly staged, nothing will be able to take that area back from you. It's an extremely well-rounded list leading into a couple strong synergies and archetypes that allow for a cagey and aggressive playstyle that trades extremely well. With the ability to take and hold the center of the table, you have very good mission play on primary. Lastly, you also create some very interesting dilemmas for your opponents during secondary selection. So by that I mean, you only give 12 points for Assassinate and 12 points for Bring It Down. You can also easily contest any of the board fixed secondaries, such as behind enemy lines or engage on all fronts, by being able to quickly get to any area on the board with your bikes and quickly shut your opponent down. So as an opponent, you see this list and you go, okay, I know I can potentially get 12 on Assassinate, maybe 12 on Bring It Down, and a few points on something else, but I literally won't ever be able to max these out. Is it worth it? Should I go fixed and guarantee the few points and risk losing by 10 or 15, or do I go tactical? So creating decisions like this is really good because you essentially dictate how your opponent needs to play before the game even starts. I had a tougher time finding weaknesses here, as I always do for all comer lists, but looking at the unit comp breakdown, I would say that perhaps it's a tad heavy on light infantry. I feel like the 300 point investment in Berserks essentially means that some matchups will be dependent on getting them in combat. So what happens if you can't, or you have a hard time doing so, like against Eldari? The list might also be a little heavy on enhancements for my liking. They certainly make the list more fun, without a doubt, and obviously they're thrown in here just because they were left over, but is the trade-off of fitting an extra around 125 points if you drop the Grimnir worth it? I'm really not sure. What do you guys think? It's the same for War Gear, assuming the crests are a typo. Should a Berserk squad be teched into anti-infantry with axes? Maybe split the bikes up for more coverage? These are all questions whose answers are entirely dependent on how the pilot felt his list performed, but worth asking nonetheless. What do you guys think? Did I miss anything? Let me know in the comments below if you identified anything else I might have missed. Wrapping the video up, let's quickly take a look at the matchups from this event. Game 1 against Eldari poses the only loss this list faced. I mentioned this in the weaknesses, but I really think the melee emphasis hurts the army in this specific matchup, where it's generally much harder to get in melee range, and therefore combat, with Eldari units due to both their strike and fade and phantasm stratagems. Essentially, they're able to create more distance between themselves and you much easier. These stratagems and the ability to manipulate their dice rolls means they can negate or augment critical rolls needed at a whim, essentially controlling trades. In a list that is built for trading, losing the ability to dictate that really hurts. They're also super fast and killy, likely to be able to outposition the large bike squad and also quickly put it down. This Eldari list and player also went on to place first at the event for added context. Generally, just a very tough matchup in my opinion that we've seen here before, resulting in the loss of many kin. Game 2 with the Blood Angels is very interesting. The 100-93 victory is quite close. As a Blood Angels player, I know that the playstyle is very much in line with what we see here with the Votann list, meaning it wants to play cagey, aggressive, and stage for the midboard, trading key units such as Death Company Marines or anything that's shot up the board by the Librarian Dreadnought. I think this list matches the tempo quite well and places durable walls in the midboard to respond to any threats. The Berserks here I'd imagine are quite nice, as you can reliably use them into any Marine elite threat, basically guaranteeing a kill if they connect. I'd imagine this was a very tense game of back and forth trading, making for a really fun, close and interactive match, which is highlighted by the final scores, so props to both players for such an even game. Game 3, Votann into Drukhari, one we've seen several times before and seems to trend positively in our favor. I think Votann are good into this matchup, as we can reliably pick up light vehicles and infantry with the models in this list. We're equally fast and can use runes to protect our Berserks as an insurance to board quarters. Likewise, even when Drukhari pop open our vehicles, out come the redundancies ready to fight or sticky the objective before our bikes pick up the threats. Overall, solid game here for Tom. Alright, Game 4, Votann into Necrons pre-Codex. Might have gone differently post-Codex, but an interesting game nonetheless, as it was against another member of Goonhammer. You can check out a full write-up of this game on their website, and I really recommend you do, as it's quite interesting to see this game's perspective from both players. So a really interesting game, but there was one key moment that really swings things for Votann, as they discuss in their post, and that was an early game use of Epic Challenge, the universal stratagem that allowed for the Ioneer champion to pick a fight with the Technomancer embedded within the Lich Guard squad, killing it. Absolutely huge here, because now the squad loses access to a bunch of durability provided via the 5-up shrug, leading to their very quick death at the hands of the Hearthguard squad, who has incredible anti-infantry killing. Tom mentions another notable strategy here was trading the bike squad really early into the Necron's infantry in order to stall their advance. This allowed him to get to the midboard choke point prior to his opponent could. We've mentioned this in the strengths of the list, but once this list makes it to the center, good luck trying to move it. All in all, a very tight fight in the early game in order to dominate the midboard, just as Necrons want to do, with Votann ultimately securing the position first through effective trading, leading to the inevitable victory from there. Let's quickly cover the last game against Astra Militarum, as I'm not too in the know on their meta list right now. I again think that Votann are favored here, however, due to the sheer amount of anti-infantry killing capabilities the army possesses, especially with a general list like this. If it's done right, it allows the bikes to capitalize on key positions to sweep objectives, or pave the way for the Hecaton to arrive centerboard and deploy its cargo. I wonder how the Concussion Ball Berserkers fared in this matchup, though I'd imagine the weapon choice made no difference into all T3 infantry. It's a very close game still, 100-71, though Votann's decent durability through their tough transports, the monstrous 10-man Hearthguard annihilating any primary threats, really allows them to shine and secure the win. I'm not sure what the meta currently is for Astra Militarum again, so if anyone has greater detail on what they think went on in this game or what the opponent brought, or even how the army tends to play at the moment, I'd love to hear it. Alright guys, I'm happy I got to share this list with you today. It really is a fun one for me and something very similar to my own current iteration. Something Tom mentions regarding this list is that the Grimnir is included due to spare points. I think this is interesting because fundamentally it doesn't really have a huge impact on games. But once our data slate comes out, and we will probably see some small increases, flexibility like this in list design means that a list like this can very easily accommodate any of those point changes with minimal impact to its overall use and play, because you simply drop the unit that was added in as extra. Overall, just a very fun list. I think it's cool, it fits my playstyle, and it seems like Tom did a really great job of securing second place at this event with it. So what did you guys think of today's list? Have you tried something similar to this? Have a favorite list you've played so far this season? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this type of content, please like and subscribe for more. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.